Baldur's Gate 3 is nearing its 1-year anniversary, and with that, so many people have ventured into the gate for the first time. But there are a lot of mechanics to warm up to, and there are tons of guides, YouTube videos, all sorts of noise out there that can be overwhelming. In this video, I want to help cut through that noise by delivering you a quick start guide to get you on your feet quickly in Baldur's Gate 3. This video assumes two things. One, you've never played BG3, and two, you have not played Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. If this is your first time on my channel, the way I do things is by upfronting the knowledge in my videos. Unfortunately, the very nature of this video is a bit harder to compile into one easy takeaway, but I'll say this up front. Play this game however the hell you want. It's entirely up to you. This is a single player narrative game, after all, and I will constantly encourage you in this video and in all my other ones to make and play the character you feel best represents you in the lands of Faerun. Don't get hung up on the absolute best class or subclass. Remember, the best class is the one you enjoy playing the most, not the one the internet tells you is the best. Play your game, not someone else's. Outside of that, we'll be discussing D&D terminology, class and race selections, ability scores, skills and how they play into said ability scores, spells, and we'll close the video out discussing combat. So if that's all you wanted to know, please feel free to shut the video down. Or if you're only interested in a certain topic, I provided chapters in the timeline and description, so jump around to wherever makes sense for you. If you are heading out and you found this video helpful, please don't forget to like, comment, and or subscribe. Any combination of those three helps my channel out immensely. I also have a huge BG3 playlist linked at the end of the video and below if you need help with any other subjects. But for those sticking around, let's get started with my quick start guide for Baldur's Gate 3. To start us off, let's have a conversation now about your race and class selection. As I said before, this is a single player narrative game, so race doesn't matter in 5th edition of Dungeons & Dragons or Baldur's Gate for that matter either. It used to be that specific race options would give you certain plus or minuses to your stats or abilities. It's not true anymore here. What you're going to be looking at as you kind of click through these options are these race features at the bottom. Say, for example, the human. The human will have a standard movement of 30 feet per turn, which pretty much everyone has, as well as civil militia. You have a weapon proficiency with spears, pikes, halberds, and glaives, and armor proficiency with light armor and shields. I'm going to go into those two things in just a second, so hang tight. We're going to talk about that right after this section. The weapon and armor proficiencies, that is. But they will also then have some sort of additional benefit. So for example, human versatility allows you to have another skill to be proficient in, and your carrying capacity is increased by a quarter. Let's take a look at the dwarf, for example, too. They have dark vision, which the human and the Githyanki do not, but in addition, they also have dwarven resilience. You have advantage on saving throws against poison, and you have resistance to poison damage. I'm going to talk about the term advantage in a little bit here, as well as saving throws. So if that is a little confusing for you, don't worry. We're going to hit it in just a little bit. So pretty much just choose whatever race makes sense for you. There are a half-orc and a halfling are both just as good as paladin than any other race, and you can make certain arguments about that if you really know the under the hood here, but don't really worry about it. Don't get caught up here. Play the character that you like the look of the most, because you're going to be staring at this character for like 100+ hours. Now for your class selection, really again, this is going to come down to you. Do you want to play a melee fighter? Well, fighter's right there. Or do you want to play a melee hybrid character? Well, paladin maybe, or ranger's there for you. Even the bard can do that. The cleric as well. The druid has capabilities with shapeshifting. The barbarian is not a hybrid character. It's going to be up close and personal. But each one of these is going to have a different way of approaching the game. And I have tons of guides on which class does which and builds and so on and so forth. But what I would say is choose what you want to do. Do you want to be a melee character? Okay, well that means that you're probably not going to want to play a wizard, you're probably not going to want to play a sorcerer, and you might not want to play a rogue depending on the melee character you have in mind, right? If you want to be an up close and personal fighter, well then you probably want to be a fighter, a barbarian, a paladin, a monk, something along those lines. If you want to be a ranged character, determine what kind of ranged character you want to be. Do you want to be a spellcaster? Well, druid, wizard, sorcerer, warlock, those are all those ranged spellcasters. Do you want to be a ranged character that uses a bow and arrow or throwing weapons or a crossbow? Well, that's going to be a ranger or a rogue or even a fighter if you specialize in that direction. So take a look at each one of these and get a sense for what makes sense for you and your play style. Of course, that's not really, that's like a big nothing salad because you're like, great guy, you didn't give me direction on what I want to choose. But my point is, take a look at these and choose for yourself what makes sense, because you can really make them all work. And most importantly, nothing is permanent when it comes to your class selection. You can respec or re-roll, re-choose, whatever term you want to use, your class real early in the game. Really, really early. It's only going to cost you 100 gold and you can do it infinitely. So if you maybe get through 90% of the game and you just hate playing a fighter, re-roll it into something else. That's what I did. I was a pure Beastmaster Ranger, meaning I was using my Ranger and I also was summoning up a Beast Companion. And it felt weak. And I was 12 levels in. 12 is the max level in this game. I was 12 levels into Ranger, so I respec'd into 8 Ranger, 4 Fighter. So play whatever the hell you want. Try a bunch of different combinations. Just choose one. Respec at any time. By the time I respec my Ranger, I maybe had an additional 10 hours left to play. So that just gives you a sense that you don't really need to be locked into any one thing. Play exactly how you want. And as kind of a sidestep to race and class, your origin, you're either going to choose one of the actual origin characters in the game, the 6 characters that you will have that will join your party, a custom origin, or the Dark Urge. If you've played Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, play the Dark Urge. That's all I will say. If you've not played them, then just go ahead and go with custom. And even if you have played Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 and you just want to play, I just want to play the game, I don't really want to worry about existential forces trying to push me in a specific direction for stories circumstances, then go with custom as well. Custom is pretty much a blank character going through the world interacting with everyone else's characters and their stories, versus the Dark Urge has a very set origin that you'll follow the steps of. And it is the only origin character, by selecting it you'll see, that I can actually choose and make a custom character within it. These ones, if I choose Gale, I'm Gale. And I am this race, I am this class, that is that. I can respec my class, but that's it. And as far as your background goes, please choose a background that makes sense for the character you have in mind. Make a little role play for your character. And maybe you are not really good at that. And you're like, shit, man, I don't know, dude. Like, I'm a guy with a sword and I kill things. Well, cool. Maybe that just means you're a soldier. Try and think of yourself in this world if you're really not good at role play. Go, okay, well, if I were to put myself in this world as I am, what would I be? You know what? Are you selling meth on the side? Dude, maybe you're a criminal in this world then. You know, are you someone who's an aspiring actor, entertainer of some sort? Well, then there you go. You know, there's something that you could kind of shoehorn your current life circumstances in with the background and just make that character in the world and interact with them however you see fit. So now that we've gone over that, let me talk now about weapon and armor proficiencies. So taking a look at the character on the lower right here, you'll see proficiencies. Weapons, skills for the wizard. If I click paladin, you'll see weapons and armor and skills. Skills we're not going to worry about just yet. We're going to talk about that at the end of this section. But when it comes to weapon proficiencies, this unlocks the capability to use special weapon actions that only those weapons have. So take, for example, a longsword. Longsword has a special skill called lacerate. You cannot access lacerate if you do not have a proficiency in either martial weapons or specifically longswords. So that's why when you take a look at, say, the drow, they have a proficiency with rapier, short sword, and hand crossbow, regardless of what class you select. Now, classes like the paladin will give you access to simple and martial weapons, which is all the weapons in the game. This is just showing me after that, rapiers, short swords, and hand crossbows, I have those no matter what because of my race. So there's always going to be some sort of combination here. If I click fighter, you'll see the same thing. If I click barbarian, you'll see the same thing. If I click druid, I get clubs, daggers, javelins, maces, quarterstaves, scimitars, sickles, spears, rapiers, short swords, hand crossbows. So you can see that these weapon proficiencies, you can use every single weapon in the game regardless of your proficiency. You cannot tap into their actual weapon abilities if you do not have the proficiency. But that is not the same for armor. In previous versions of D&D, you could not use armor you did not have a proficiency in. In this version of D&D, I'm going to go ahead and click Paladin. We can, if we have an armor proficiency, you can see right here, wearing light armor will not impose disadvantage on your attack rolls or prevent you from casting spells. Meaning, if I do not have light armor proficiency, I will have a disadvantage on attack rolls, and I cannot cast spells. Again, don't worry about advantage and disadvantage. We're going to talk about it in just a little second here. But this helps me to understand that, okay, I want to play a character that uses medium armor. Well, the wizard doth not start with any armor proficiencies. The sorcerer, same thing. Warlock has light armor proficiency. So you can add in, with multi-classing combinations and the such, armor proficiencies into your class. Unless it's heavy armor. Heavy armor is the only armor proficiency, you can see right here, that comes only if you either select it as a feat or it's your level 1, the very first one that you select, Paladin or Fighter, for example, class. If you select them as your starting class, you'll have heavy armor. If you say you took 5 levels into Cleric and then put 1 level into Paladin, you will not get heavy armor proficiency. Unless you choose a class that gets heavy armor proficiency as part of a subclass. What I mean by that is, Cleric, by default, does not get heavy armor. It does right here, but that is because their subclass of Life Domain grants them heavy armor. Or Trickery Domain, War Domain grants them heavy armor. Light Domain does not. Nature Domain. Nature Domain grants them heavy armor. So because this subclass grants them heavy armor, if I were to take this subclass at level 11 or at level 1, it doesn't matter, I will have heavy armor. The same is true here for the Ranger. Ranger in 5th edition, well, in Dungeons and specifically in Baldur's Gate, has Ranger Knight, which gives them heavy armor proficiency. That is the only way you can get it outside of it. And it is worth noting with heavy armor, if you have heavy armor on, you can still cast spells. That was not true in any other D&D version except for now, or maybe anything else other than Baldur's Gate. I'm not really sure. I'm not smart. But if you have heavy armor on and you're a barbarian, you cannot use your rage ability here. I think it even says it in here, right? Nope, it does not. But if you have heavy armor on, you cannot use your rage ability. That is worth noting because you can use armor as a barbarian. You can do it. There's no problem with it. But if you have heavy armor on, you cannot use it. So that is how your weapon and your armor proficiencies work. Outside of that are your skill proficiencies. So weapon and armor, even though they're called proficiencies, they exist in a different world than skill proficiencies because there is something called a proficiency bonus, which is right here at the top. This says +2. This will automatically turn to +3, then to +4 at levels 6 and then I believe 9 or something of the sort. But either way, this will progress up. And what that proficiency means is, if I press this button, you can see that any of these little blips that we've selected means that we are proficient in them. Or if it has this icon or this icon, we're proficient in those skills. So that means that it will add the proficiency bonus to those skills. Or if you see something that says, we'll add your proficiency bonus to something, it will add whatever that static proficiency bonus is to whatever that roll or that item or that action, whatever it is, it gets added in. So now that we've had that put together, let's now talk about your ability points and advantage and disadvantage. But putting all this together, ability points and our proficiencies and everything, it all comes together right here. So you have got these 6 abilities. Sometimes they're called stats, attributes, whatever you want to call them, but the game calls them ability points. And you can see here we've got strength, dex, con, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. Strength is obviously going to be applied to any melee weapon and also determines how far you can jump and how much you can carry. Dexterity applies to your finesse weapons, which are weapons that will use your dexterity ability if it's higher than your strength, as well as your initiative and your armor class. We'll talk about that in a second. Your constitution, which is your hit points, your intelligence, which is important for, it's only important for wizards, really. Wisdom, which is important for clerics, druids, and rangers, And then charisma, which is important for bards, paladins, sorcerers, warlocks, and also your character that's doing the most talking, which is going to be your main character, you basically in the world. So all these start at 8. That's the minimum. And every 2 points you put into them, you get a +1 to their check. So at 8, let's look at dexterity. You can see this says a -1 to dexterity checks, but my strength now says +0. So every 2 points gives you an additional +1. So you can see how that's going up. Put this right there. Up to, in character creation, a max of +3. With further feats and items and all sorts of stuff in the game, you can get this much higher, but for all intents and purposes, this is the max in the character creator. So at 16, you can see that this gives us a +3 to strength checks, also a +3 to saving throws. Every single ability score will have a check associated with that ability score, so in this case strength, and a saving throw associated with that ability score. There will be certain things in the game that will do certain saving throws according to that ability check. What I mean by that is, if you were to get shot with a fireball, that is a dexterity saving throw. So if your dexterity is super low, or in this case a negative number, it will take whatever you roll and subtract 1 to it. So let's say that you had to beat a 10 because the fireball hit, and it's a 10 to save against this thing. Okay, you roll your die and you roll a 10. Uh-oh, you have a -1 to your dexterity check. Well, now you actually rolled a 9, the fireball hits you. And I'm just using blanket numbers here and generalizations, but just to give you a frame of reference of how these things work. And also further with constitution and intelligence and wisdom and charisma, so on and so forth. But there's another portion of this that applies to your ability points, and those are your skill proficiencies. I'm going to go ahead and press change here. So the top 2 are strength skills. Well, nope, just the top one, Top 1 is a strength skill. How do I know that? Because I'm not smart, but secondly, because right below I put strength. It says strength. Acrobatics, sleight of hand, and stealth are all dexterity skills. How do I know that? Hover over it, right there it says dexterity. Now you can see the difference here. Remember our dexterity was a -1? Well, that is reflected right here. This is going to add in addition to any proficiencies you've got. So, for example, our athletics is at a +3 because we have a +3 to our strength. Well, let's become proficient in it. Well, now we have that static +2 proficiency bonus. It's applied to athletics, and now we have a +5. Meaning, if there's ever any time we need to do an athletics check in specific, then I roll a dice, and whatever that dice gets, it adds 5. Every single die roll in this game is off of a D20, 1 to 20. That's the number. Conversely, too, if I were looking at sleight of hand, and you know what? That chest we want to open has what's called a DC, difficulty check, or difficulty class, actually, is what I think it is, of 15. Okay, well, that means that our D20, that the game is all rolling. This is all numbers that you're going to see in front of your face. You don't have to roll physical die and be like, oh. Either way, the game's going to roll the die, and let's say it was at DC of 15. Well, shit, well, we rolled a 15, but it's a -1. So it was a 14, and we failed opening the chest. This is how these things come together to show you how they kind of play into the game world. Animal handling is a wisdom. Pretty much everything below survival, so deception, intimidation, performance, and persuasion are all charisma. So having high charisma increases these. So right now persuasion is a +1 because we've put a proficiency into it, right? So from a -1 to a +1. Let's jack this up. Put this up to 16. So now when we come back to this menu, it says +5. But also the other 3 skills that are corresponding to charisma also have a +3. So that's how all of that works together. And you can assign a +2 or a +1 bonus to any 2 ability points. Meaning, like you can see here, I have put, I'm going to take these off real quick, charisma to 14, and I applied the +2 to bring it to 16. We put strength to 15, and I'm going to apply the +1 bonus to bring it to 16 as well. You'll do these in whatever combination makes sense for your character and how you want to approach them. And if something is at an 8 with a -1, don't really worry about it. It's not going to be too big of a deal. Two other little things I do want to bring up is dexterity affects your initiative. So that's basically the order in which your character goes in combat. Whenever you initiate combat, a hidden dice is rolled for initiative, and then everyone goes in the order of the highest to the lowest of their roll. So if I put points into this, at 10 there's nothing because we're at +0, right? But 12 puts us at a +1, which is then represented over here. We have a +1 to our initiative. +2 to our initiative. Well, and a +3 to our initiative. Also, dexterity will add to your armor class, which is basically what the game will use to define whether or not you get hit by a melee attack, a range attack, certain other things. And that armor class is added in depending upon the armor. Light armor will get up to +3. Medium armor will get up to +2. Heavy armor will get no benefits from dexterity. So if your character goes, if you go, I know I only want to wear heavy armor in my game, then you could be pretty much fine with 10 or 12 dexterity and not really ever have to worry about the dexterity bonus towards your armor class, which is nice. And lastly is your constitution here. This will affect your additional hit points, right? Which you can see over here. So if I add so that brings us up to 10. Why am I saying these are good things. If I bring it up here, it brings it up to 11, to 14. So every 2 points, this is going to go up by 1 point. So you can see how there's a direct correlation between your constitution, your dexterity, and your initiative, and your hit points, and your armor class, and all these things. Now, all this stuff comes together too with two very important things called advantage and disadvantage. You will randomly do rolls throughout the game that will either be at an advantage or at a disadvantage. An advantage means, I think if I some of these will show advantage on them. There we go. Advantage means that you roll 2 dice and your character will choose the higher of the 2. A disadvantage is you roll 2 dice and you take the lower of the 2. For all intents and purposes, you want an advantage on yourself and you want to impose a disadvantage on the enemy for whatever it is. Negative effects that say, hey, you have now a disadvantage on attack rolls. That means every time you go to do an attack roll against an enemy, 2 dice are going to be rolled and your character is going to choose the lower of the 2 dice. I'm saying that these dice are going to be rolled. That only happens in very specific instances where you see the dice. Otherwise, it's behind the scenes like it is for pretty much every single other RPG that you play. But this covers pretty much character creation and all the pivotal portions of the D&D terminology that you're going to interact with. Let's now jump into some conversations about how spells work and how they all come together. Before we load into the game to show off combat and a lot of other things, I think character creation might be the best way to explain this, but spell casting in this game is going to use a number of variables to determine whether or not you hit with an item, with a spell, or get hit with a spell. All going to come down to the specifics of that spell. So we've switched our character to a wizard, and in that we have cantrips and we have spells. We have some different variations of that, but what I want to talk about very quickly are how your spell casting capability plays into prepared spells. The formula, and I think it's different for almost every single spell caster, but majority of the time it is your caster level. So in this case, we are wizard level 1 plus your spell casting ability modifier, meaning we are wizards, so our spell casting ability is intelligence. Our modifier right now is 0. So we can only prepare 1 spell because it's 1 plus 0. Let's go ahead and take these numbers and jack this up, right? Let's go ahead and bring that down and do this to 16. So now this is a +3. 3 plus 1 allows us to prepare 4 spells. Knowing a spell and preparing a spell are two different things. Knowing it means it's in your spell book of spells or your repertoire that you can swap into your prepared spell location. Prepared spell means that it's ready to be cast. You cannot swap a known spell into a prepared spell slot during combat, but if you're out of combat, you can just do that at will. This is different though for certain classes. Paladins, wizards, clerics, and druids all have a prepared spell capability like we just mentioned. But if I were to choose maybe a warlock can only choose spells when they level up. and those spells are the only spells that they've got. The same thing here with a bard. Bard will only choose spells when they level up, and they can swap spells when they level up as well. Like, hey, you know what? I had this spell, I'm going to swap it with this spell. Well, you can only do that when you are leveling. Or if you want to respec the entire class. This is also the case for sorcerers who use their magic innately versus wizards who learn their magic. That's a difference. Sorcerers are born into their magic capabilities. Wizards have to learn it. So wizards use spell books. Sorcerers just know how to do it. And this will come into stuff like the monk subclass, the Four Elements monk, or the fighter eldritch knight. They all will tap into specific types of spell casting and what have you. But it's worth noting that's how that works. Now, when it comes to your cantrips, cantrips are level 0 spells, meaning that they do not cost you a spell slot to cast. You can cast Ray of Frost every turn if you want. Conversely, your spells will be associated with a number. Right here, it just says 1, level 1 spell slot. And when we jump into the game, I'll show this off a little bit more, and we'll talk a little bit more about how this comes together. But your spell slots they will limit you to those spells, meaning that you can only cast the amount of level 1 spells as per level 1 spell slots that you've got. This number will increase as you level your character up, but it's worth noting that you will be limited. It is a resource that will replenish every time you long rest, unless you're a warlock. Warlock is the only class that can short rest to replenish those spell slots. There's a lot of information I'm throwing your way, and if it's a little dizzying, I get it, don't worry, but once you put it into practice, you'll get it like that. It's an immediate kind of click. You go, oh, okay, cool. That's how that works. Got it. 100% into it. So right now, Magic Missile, for example, is a level 1 spell slot. If I have 3 level 1 spell slots and I cast Magic Missile, I can only do it 3 times. I cannot do it a 4th time until I long rest. Conversely, like I made the point before, cantrips, I can cast these as many times as I want. So it makes sense to have 1 or 2 damage dealing cantrips if you want to be a primarily spellcaster character. And on that note, we have this at the top: your spellcasting ability, your spell save DC, and your spell attack. So take a look at this. It says right there, spell save DC. Certain spells require enemies to make a saving throw. The higher your spell difficulty class, spell save DC, the harder it is to resist your spells. And spell attack, a bonus to melee and ranged spell attacks, improves your chance to hit with certain spells. So what this means is I'm going to take our intelligence and I'm going to bring this all the way down to 8 again. And you can see that this number now is at 9. So it is now way easier for them to resist this spell, because that's basically the number that they have to beat. This number already has this added into it. I know that's kind of confusing, but let's just go ahead and do this again, and let's just jump this up to, where is this, +2 spells. So this is now has that number factored in. This would be a base of 8 plus 4, so it equals 12. You don't have 12 and certain things get a +4 to it to 16. No, this number, this could not be in the game. It wouldn't matter. This is just to give you some clarity on how that number is getting to this. Spell save DC is 8 at base, and this is bringing it up to 4. So it's getting a +1 plus the 2. I'm sorry, it's a +2 plus the 2 we've got right now. Now if I bring this up to 16, 17 is fine. You can see that is now +2 plus 3, because we have the +2, the base +2, and the +3 from intelligence gets added into this. At 8 plus 5 is 13. So many pluses and minuses, and I'm terrible at arithmetic, but still, either way, that's how this works. And some spells, like Magic Missile, will always hit. It says they always hit their target. They will not ever use this functionality. But other spells, like Ice Knife, for example, it leaves an ice, throw a shard of ice that deals 1 to 10 piercing damage. It explodes and deals 2 to 12 cold damage to any nearby. It leaves an ice surface. What's cool here is this will do the damage. If they resist it, okay, it doesn't work. But on miss, the shard of ice still explodes. So they still have to deal with an explosion. Or, what's another? I mean, cantrip here. Here. This one, just 1d10. So they have to just resist against these spell save DC items to see if they actually are going to hit them. I don't have Fireball, unfortunately, because I was going to show you that one has a special capability. And one of the last things I do want to talk about with these spells is this right here at the bottom, concentration. So some spells will need you to maintain a concentration or a focus on them. And this is going to be based off of your constitution. This will be a constitution check. Remember how we talked about specific checks? Well, the enemy hits you and it will take a look at your constitution to see if it's going to pass or fail. If you fail your constitution checks, you lose concentration of this. This isn't always a bad thing. I mean, it just means you got to recast the spell, but sometimes this is really huge, right? If you're doing something like, okay, protection from good and evil, this was giving you a protective capability. Now you've lost concentration on it. You have to recast it and thus use a spell slot again. So just keep those things in mind and how they work. And some of them will last until long rest, meaning it lasts until you, well, take a long rest. All that stuff kind of plays itself together. Let's jump into the game, though, to talk a little bit more about this stuff and also combat. Loading into the game, we can finish our conversation on spells because for some reason this didn't have it in the actual character creation screen. So when I look at this one, Arms of Hadar, or Hadar, you can see that this has a strength save. Some spells will have a save associated with a specific difficulty class or ability score. So for example here, Arms of Hadar is a strength save versus this one is an attack roll. It says right here, a dice roll determines whether an attack hits a target. The attack succeeds if the roll matches or exceeds the target's armor class. So rather than them trying to make a strength save to resist the spell, this will go against their armor class to see if they resist the spell. But this also affects too spells that aren't direct damage spells. Even if ability spells such as this one, Hex, this is a charisma save. So when I want to hex a target, they're going to make a charisma save against it. Meaning, of course, they're going to take a look at their charisma score and see if they can save against that charisma or that actual ability. And like I said too, looking at a warlock, we have one single spell slot that recharges on a short rest and our cantrips that we can use infinitely. But now let's transition to have a conversation about combat. So jumping into the very first combat in the game, we have our scenario in front of us. And every single combat will unfold just like this. It is a turn-based sequence, in which case you'll have things go as they go. And you can see at the top the roll that occurred for initiative. And this is an order from 1 to whatever the last number is. This could be sometimes like this, all the way across the top of the screen, or just like this little guy right here. And you can see that sometimes you'll have your borders, they'll be braided together like this, meaning that both these characters can act at the same time, simultaneously, whatever you want. And this is something I really want to impose upon you because I used to think so one-dimensionally about character turns. I used to just think, okay, Lizelle here is going to go and do her turn, then Tav is going to go do his turn. Whatever it is. Really, I want you to think of these as going in tandem or in conjunction or setting someone up for the alley-oop and the slam dunk. Put in the hoop like slam, get ready for a space jam. Whatever the situation is, I want you to think of these characters not as a single character, but as a party, which they will be, right? You're going to have 2 more characters in this party, so you might as well think of them as characters that can work in conjunction. Use things that will set stuff up for a better result. An example of that would be, if I use this rush attack, it will has a chance to knock things off balance. And if I knock them off balance, that means they have a disadvantage on strength and dexterity checks. And attack rolls against it have advantage, meaning I could somehow pair these 2 together. I rush attack into something, and then before I finish Lazelle's turn, I use this character to do a strength or a dexterity check against this target. Or maybe I have this character do an attack to get that advantage on attack rolls. Whatever it is, try to use these characters in conjunction. I wanted to say that before I get into the meat and potatoes of this entire situation. So, now that we've talked about all that, let's take a look at our actual combat capabilities. I'm gonna go ahead and increase that little. If you didn't know that, you can press this button to increase this. If you're on PC, I don't think you can on console. So at the bottom, you have all these little tabs that will sort things based off of any passives that you might have, like knocking things unconscious, or other passives that you'll get, like Great Weapon Mastery, stuff like that. They'll all be in those tabs. Or you've got it all in here, and you can kind of move these around. If you're on PC, you can press K. I'm not really sure what the button is on console. I can find out right now by doing this. On console, it is Oh god, it's not working. Oh, okay, there we go. On console, it is... what is this button here? Context menu. Nope. R1. It's somewhere in here. Oh my god, this is so much more difficult of a game on console. But R1 does a lot of these abilities for you rather than looking down at that entire screen the entire time. The radial customization, you can add things in here. So add a radial to do more things to it, so you can add more stuff to this entire wheel, whatever the situation is. Let me jump back to PC before I have a brain aneurysm. So if I press K on PC though, I can pull in all these capabilities onto whatever bar I want. And if you go to custom here, you can say pull range attack right there. Okay, well that's now number 1. I know I'm always going to be doing range attacks with this character. Well, there you go. I can just press number 1. And that kind of allows me to... It doesn't work. You kind of have to unlock that. You have to do this at the smallest size possible, and then when you expand it out, it'll do whatever. It's kind of a weird situation, but you can use these to kind of create like a standard, like almost MMO style template for all of your main ability scores that you use on your character, whatever it is. Coming back here, we can go through this now. So with our combat, we have some things that we can do. We can jump, we can hide, we can shove things, we can help our friends, we can dash, which doubles our movement speed, we can attack stuff, we can disengage from combat, which incurs an opportunity attack, which I'll show in a second. All these things. But the big thing we're going to do first is move. So you'll see in the lower right here is this wheel. As I drag this out, you can see how much movement I've got left until this bar turns from that nice white to that reddish pink right there, right? As we kind of make this distance. And it says I'm at 30 feet, that's the max I can go. I can't go 31.01. So that shows you we're tapped out on our entire movement. And every single character has an action, which is probably going to be a spell, whatever it is, and a bonus action, which can be a dash or a jump, all sorts of things. If you want to quickly jump into that, you can click this button, and you see all of your primary actions. You can click this, you can see all of your bonus actions. You can increase your amount of actions and bonus actions depending upon certain scenarios. You can quaff certain potions, certain subclasses will get additional bonus actions, but for all intents and purposes, you will only have one of each unless you hit a circumstance where you don't. So, let me show you how all this works. We're going to come over here to this imp. We're going to run 20 feet. And I'm going to hit this character. So this little aura around me, I just hold down control, it shows the range in which I can hit something. So right now I'm within range of the imp. If I were to move back, I would probably be out of range. But let me go ahead and press left click. Okay, so I hit it for 4 damage, as you well see. And that used my primary action. So what's left? What bonus actions do I have left? Well, I can jump or I can shove. That's all I've got left for the most part. You can also quaff potions. Those are almost always bonus actions. And I can cast certain spells. This one, for example, says at the bottom that it costs simply a bonus action and a level 1 spell slot. Spells for all, it will pretty much tell you always their cost at the very bottom of their tab. But from this point, I want to also explain opportunity attacks. So you can see I still have movement, so maybe I want to get away from this character. Well, this could provoke an opportunity attack. An opportunity attack is an automatic attack against an enemy moving out of reach. Disengage is useful because it shuts down opportunity attacks. Rogues get abilities to use disengage as a bonus action. Same thing with dash. So, and hide even too. We're not a rogue though. So I'm just to show you, I'm going to move away. Okay, so right as I move out of distance, it allows them to trigger that opportunity attack, and they can go ahead and do it. And then I can still use my bonus action if I want here, and just to show you too, we can use Hex. Okay, we hex their dexterity. So I'm going to jump back over here to Lae'zel, and I'm actually going to do this. I'm going to end this character's turn, because they are out of turns to use. Now if I click this, and we'll go to Lae'zel. If I click back to my previous character, you'll see this menu come up. Well, I can say, oh, you know what? I actually forgot to use one of their things, or I didn't move all the way. I can press cancel end turn and go back to doing whatever I wanted on this character. So don't think that if you press end turn and you're at a linked character like this, that things are over with. The only time that was a problem is if you don't have a linked border like this, and turn just goes to the next character's round. It's like, you forgot to do something. Well, you're unfortunately shit out of luck. So with Lazy Lozelle here, we can do some other fun actions. And this is where I want to talk about this. These are your reactions. These are things that the game will automatically do for you or ask if you want done. You have, by default, things will be either on or off. That is this button right here, this little checkbox. Now, the game can either ask you whether or not you want to do it, or it'll automatically do it. Why this is important is this is the third kind of hidden action in the game. You have your primary action, your bonus action, and then a reaction. So reactions will replenish every single turn, but they can only be done once. So reactions, such as opportunity attacks, are responses you can have to events. Reactions can trigger both during and outside of your turn. So if Lozelle moves over here to this character and that character moves out of range, well, her reaction will kick in. She'll try to do an opportunity attack, and I've told the game to ask me if it's okay, because maybe I have a bunch of other abilities that are actually reaction based, so I don't want to shut that down. So we have that capability. So a couple other things though are I can go ahead and press this button, F, and switch on over to my ranged weapon and do a ranged attack, or this and jump back on over to this. If I was dual wielding, I could press this button right here and it would toggle dual wield, meaning that my character will attack with both its main hand and offhand if the dual wield is set to on. If it's set to off, they'll only attack with their main hand. Just a really cool little capability that you've got. Now, we talked about weapon proficiencies, right? Well, that's these abilities right here. Pommel Strike, Lacerate, Rush Attack. That is all a part of weapon abilities. For all intents and purposes, they're kind of like spells for fighters, more or less, you know what I mean? But this shows you that this thing is going to, within a 30-foot radius, it'll have a strength save, it'll be an attack roll, but a short rest. So that strength save is going to come into the off-balance portion right here. But basically, this tells me that after I use it, I will not be able to use it again until I short rest, or some of them will say long rest on them. I think mostly they almost always say short rest. Very, very few will say long rest. So we have that capability. We can run over here. I'm actually going to do this to make a point. Her range is a little bit further, so I can hit this thing because we're using a two-handed sword. So I can kind of go ahead and slap that. There we go, and we're good to go. And we've gone ahead and killed it. And we can still use our movement to run around over here to do a pommel strike. Instead, I could have used a dash here, which would have doubled my movement, where I would have cost me an action, but I could have moved 60 feet. There's a lot of things that you can do in every turn. And I encourage you to really take a look at the environment, see what you can take or tap into, all sorts of little things that you'll learn as you come through the game. Combat is going to be an ever-evolving thing, and it will be very challenging to begin with, but it is something that you will eventually become quite good at and adept at, especially as you learn the process of going about it. How to get into engagements, how to surprise things. All these things are more of the nuance that I've covered in bigger videos, but I wanted to give you a primer here on combat so you at least understand how all of this works and how it brings all the things that we've talked about together to allow you to actually manipulate the game world in killing things. And one last thing before we conclude our video here. I was talking about those cantrips and those spell slots. Well, we've used our hex, so we're out of spell slots, but look, we have plenty of Eldritch Blast that we can use because it is a cantrip. Clicking these will always give you the corresponding thing that you can use with it, right? So right now we can go ahead and use this, shoot them, and not kill them, because that's just the way it's going to be right now, I suppose. But maybe we can do this. Nope, can't reach. Either way, that's how all that works. I was hoping to kill the thing right there, but I guess not. I can reapply this. Maybe that'll do some action here. But that is how combat comes together. I wanted to quickly show that off before we conclude everything. Once everything's said and done, you now can rest, or short rest, whatever the situation is. You'd press this and you get 2 short rests unless you have a character that grants you the benefits of a short rest. bards have an ability that basically give you a free short rest. But you see here, short rest, twice a day you can restore 50% of your hit points. Warlocks restore their spell slots. So, boom, our spell slots are now restored. Conversely though, the other option would be to long rest, which we cannot do right now. But we would go to a camp and we would use a long rest. You need to use supplies to do the long rest. You can use supplies to regain hit points, spell slots, and short rests. So this is the only way to get all those things back online. One thing to note though is that also what happens during a long rest, this is a really important point, is that this will progress certain story or things within the game. Like maybe you've talked to a specific character and they say, I can't talk about this now. Usually you need a long rest to continue that portion of their story, or there's a certain thing in the game that says, hey, let's go back to your camp and have a party, and then we'll talk further as you reach certain milestones. Well, you cannot use supplies and just do like a rest without the supplies, and it does not advance the actual game story, but it'll advance the those little circumstances that happen at the camp. So this is a great way to, rather than simply use supplies, long rest, end the day, you can just use a non-supply rest to give your character a chance to push through a lot of the narratives that they might have missed. This is really cool if you want to really jump into that side of the story. But at that, it brings our video here to a close. So hopefully this helped you out and give you a good primer of jumping into the game. You now have an understanding of how proficiencies work, what advantage and disadvantage is, if getting motion sickness from this rumbling screen right now. All these little things that come together to make Baldur's Gate 3. And there are so many more aspects to this. I'm really just trying to give you at least a way for you to jump into the game so you're not just going, well, what the hell is all this? The game does have a tutorial and it does guide you through the majority of what I just said, but sometimes it's hard to put all those things together if you don't have the proper context. And hopefully now you understand things so that you can make the proper decisions when you're creating your character, or the proper choices when selecting your proficiencies or your spells or what have you. And if you have any other questions, by all means, let me know in the comment section below. I've been playing, God, so many hours over the last 11 or 12 months now at this point. So I've got plenty of guides up, plenty of videos you can tap into, but there's a great community of Baldur's Gate 3 players that are more than willing to help you out if you are stuck on anything across Reddits, Discords, the comment sections of a lot of videos, whatever the situation is. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. Have a good one and take care.